People say cardio kills your gains, but I literally just ran the Sydney Marathon in 3 hours, and I actually got more jacked whilst training for the marathon. So I'm not here to go through the science behind cardio and its associations with muscle growth. I'm not here to go through all the meta-analyses like Jeff Nippard or all these other guys. I'm here to tell you about my own experience. I've trained and run a marathon, and I was able to build strength and muscle at the same time. So I took this marathon training block pretty seriously. I dedicated a 16-week block of training for this marathon, and I ran the marathon in 3 hours and 4 minutes. That's at a pace of 4 minutes and 20 seconds per kilometer on average. Now, for your reference, only 1% of the population actually runs a marathon. And of that 1% of the population that runs a marathon, less than 2.5% of those people finish in a time of under 3 hours and 5 minutes. So yes, look, I'm stroking my ego, but the point is here to tell you that I took this training block very seriously. I was running 5 times a week, 60 to 70 kilometers every week. So it wasn't like I was doing a piddly amount of cardio and could still build muscle at the same time. This was a decent amount of running, an intense form of cardio that I was doing, and I was able to still build muscle and get stronger. I was doing over, on average, 4 hours of running every week. And at the same time, whilst running 5 times per week, I was in the gym strength training pretty much every day. And by the way, if you're looking for a complete program as to how to transform your physique from skinny fat to aesthetic, I have a program that's the first link in the description below. Now, I've been running for 1.5 years now, and the way that I got into it was by doing this challenge called 75 Hard. And as part of that challenge, you have to do 2 workouts every day. So I was normally just going to the gym, but I had to add in an extra workout. So that extra workout I chose was a form of cardio, and I chose running because that was probably the form of cardio that came most naturally to me. So I did 2 workouts every day for 75 days last year. And the prospect of doing that at the beginning of the challenge was very scary to me because I'd subscribed to this common belief that's out there that cardio and running is extremely negative for muscle growth in the gym. And I was scared that I would become overtrained, working out twice every day. And I was so scared that I was going to just wither away, that I would become extremely skinny, lose a lot of muscle, lose a lot of size, and end up looking quite bad. But it's funny because during that 75-day block, I actually got into the best shape of my entire life. And I had seen crazy amounts of muscle growth in that 75 days, despite doing heaps of cardio. And I got stronger. My weights that I was lifting in the gym went up. The reps I was doing in the gym went up. And I just felt the best. I looked the best I ever had. So that 75 Hard challenge last year, combined with this Sydney Marathon training block, has just proven to me, undoubtedly, that cardio and running does not kill your gains. In fact, I think it actually has a positive impact on it. But the common rhetoric that's out there is that cardio and running will kill your gains, and that if you do too much running, too much cardio, you're going to see negative consequences of that in the gym by getting weaker, or by, at the very least, not getting stronger from workout to workout. People will say that you get skinnier and you end up looking like one of those marathon runners. But I think the point here, what I've experienced, is that sure, that might have a bit of merit to it, that doing too much cardio can have a negative impact on your ability to build muscle. But the point of cardio, that phenomenon occurs where cardio will actually have a negative impact on your ability to build muscle growth, is so high. The threshold for that is so high that if you do all the cardio in the world, if you do marathon training blocks like I did, you are still not at that requisite level or requisite threshold to actually see the amount of cardio you're doing have a negative consequence on your progress in the gym. So I think, sure, if you do 200 kilometers of running every week, like the pro marathon runners do, then yes, I think that's going to have negative impacts on your ability to build muscle if you are training quite consistently and that's one of your goals. But the average person that's looking to build muscle is not doing a marathon runner's worth of running every week. And I think that people's perception of how much running is actually required to have a negative impact on your ability to build muscle in the gym is so skewed. And I think people are overly scared of cardio and running when there's absolutely no reason to be scared of it. And in fact, we should be excited at the fact of doing cardio because it can help us get into better shape, get us leaner, and might actually be able to get us stronger if we're plateauing in the gym. And a similar thing that I was scared of at the outset of the 75 hard challenge and also at the outset of this Sydney Marathon training block was that I would become overtrained and just overly fatigued at the amount of exercise I was doing. But again, I think that threshold of overtraining is just so high and your ceiling is so much higher than you really think it is. Because what is overtraining? I think overtraining is doing an amount of physical activity to the point where you're no longer able to recover. And specifically in terms of building muscle when you're training in the gym, overtraining is training to the point where it's ineffective. Every time you go to the gym, there's no point you actually going because your body is not able to recover. In other words, build muscle in response to the training stimulus you put your body under. Now, throughout this period of training for the marathon, I was getting stronger in the gym. So I was building muscle, which just goes to show that I actually wasn't overtrained because my training was still effective. I was getting stronger and building muscle. And so again, despite running so much in the lead up for this marathon, I had still not reached that high threshold of overtraining. That being said, I think a huge factor as to how I didn't get overtrained was proper diet and getting enough sleep, including high quality sleep. The thing that I find most beneficial about doing cardio in terms of your physique and getting aesthetic is that it keeps you so lean. It becomes very difficult to actually eat to the point where you're gonna get fat. When you do so much cardio, it gets to the point where it's hard to not stay lean, which is funny because the status quo is that it's hard to get lean rather than stay lean. And so when you're just burning so many extra calories every day, your diet becomes so much more flexible. Of course, you still have to eat clean, but because you just have such a higher calorie expenditure every day, the quantity of the foods that you're eating can be essentially to your heart's desires. You can eat however much you want and still be at maintenance or in a slight deficit. And that's what kept me so lean and allowed me to get into the best shape that I ever had been during that 75 hard challenge. I didn't track calories. I wasn't always so conscious of, oh, should I have this to eat? Or is that going to fit within my calorie budget? I never had to get the scales out to weigh the amount of food that I was eating either. And when you think about it, that whole process of tracking calories and making sure you're eating a certain amount of calories and macros every day is a very mentally burdensome process. So when you do cardio, you can actually eliminate that entire process. And the cardio might only take you 45 minutes per day, but it gets rid of all of that hassle that you do for the entire day. So it's 45 minutes of work for the rest of your day, 16 hours to be stress-free in terms of you don't have to track calories, you don't have to get scales out to weigh things. The other thing with cardio is that your cardiovascular health obviously improves. So your blood circulation and your oxygen uptake and your endurance increases. So when you have a higher general level of cardiovascular health and fitness, it allows you to actually push harder in the gym. And you might actually be able to recover better from session to session as well. So for example, when I didn't do cardio, I remember I would do dumbbell rows. And by the end of the set, my heart rate would get to 160 beats per minute. So my cardio was giving out before my back muscles and my lats were. So I would be stopping the set early and not actually going to failure, which of course would have hindered my muscle growth. Same kind of phenomenon occurred to me during barbell squats. Because they're such a heavy compound exercise and require a lot of effort, it actually became a bit of cardio for me. Again, my heart rate would get to that 160 beat per minute mark. Now when I do rows and squats, my heart rate will max out at 130. So the fitness that I've gained through running has increased my endurance in the gym so that when I take these exercises to failure, it is because my muscles have reached failure rather than my cardiovascular system. One of the last things I want to talk about here is that there's a difference between training for aesthetics and strength. So on this channel, we are mainly concerned with aesthetics. And a big part of being aesthetic is being lean. So I think in taking this advice into account, you need to be clear on what your goals are. Because if your goals are aesthetics, being lean is a huge part of that. And so the cardio piece will fit into this quite nicely. But if your goal is actually strength and you want to lift as much weight as humanly possible on the bench press, on deadlifts, on squats, then being lean is actually not in your best interest. And so cardio, again, might not be in your best interest. And I just wanted to caveat that. If you are going to incorporate cardio into your total workout regime now, I would say try and do your weightlifting and cardio sessions separately. So what I mean by that is try not to do cardio directly after you do your weightlifting sessions. Because when you do that, you're just so fatigued, you're so tired from having put in an hour's worth of weightlifting. Assuming you've pushed yourself pretty hard, having to go for a run or getting on the treadmill or getting on the elliptical or doing something like that is going to be so incredibly difficult, as opposed to if you let yourself rest for 8 to 10 hours during the day and then you came back and did the cardio in the evening. I think that's a much more sustainable approach to take, and it will let you actually stick to the cardio over the long term because you're going to have the energy to actually do the cardio. So if you've made it this far into the video, it signals to me that you are very serious about transforming your physique, in which case I think you would immensely benefit from my program that is the first link in the description below. And if you learned anything from this video, please consider subscribing. We're getting to 20K subs soon, and I'll see you in the next one.